The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week we review Austin FC's home loss to the LA Galaxy. We preview the away match in Salt Lake coming up, and we interview author and podcast host Jessica Luther on the Cecilio Dominguez situation. My name is Landon Cottom, and I'm joined as always by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley. And, one of the things we talked last week about whether folks should be happy, should pull or not pull for Seattle in the CONCACAF Champions League final. And I feel like we should follow up on that a little bit. So they pulled out the big victory. How did you feel after the match? Were you excited?
I was excited. Yeah, I was one of the folks that I think it's good for American soccer. So I wanted the Sounders to win. And so I was happy that they were able to do it.
Yeah, I was too. Although they kind of paid a heavy price for it, right? They lost João Paulo for the year? Was that right?
João Paulo had an ACL tear. Nuhu went down really early, but he was fine and was able to actually play in the next game. But I think those are the only two. I think João Paulo is the only major injury, but that's a big one. João Paulo is an amazing player and one of the most important players on that team. And the guy they subbed in was 16-year-old, one of the teenagers that beat us in Austin last year. But I'm not really sure how they replace him in that team because there's not another player, not even on that team, but in the league like João Paulo really. And so they have a lot of talent on that team. I'm sure that they're going to be fine no matter what. But that's a big loss to that team and a big loss to the league, in my opinion.
Yeah, and back to the with this being a salary cap league, and you're obviously going to get him back. Like there's not a go out and get another guy kind of solution. Right. That you can have that at all. And I think, it's right. With the interesting, it's the guy they brought in. So, I mean, maybe Seattle is they're just hitting on all cylinders, right? They're they've got DPs that are bought in and care and love it. They've got they're bringing in academy kids. They're bringing in MLS veterans from other places. It's an interesting way to build.
They are tied for last in the West.
But they are tied for last in the West somehow. Yeah, that's true.
And we'll still be number 2 on the power rankings today. But yeah, congrats, Seattle. So you're out of town right now. You didn't get to go to the game yesterday, right?
I did not go to the game yesterday because it was my wife's birthday and Mother's Day, and so we went to dinner last night. And so I had to. Sometimes there's been a couple times when I've missed the game and we won, and that was fun to come home knowing the outcome, but. Knowing that I was going to spend 2 hours watching this and we were going to lose 1-0, that was a little bit depressing to sit my way through it between 10 p.m. and midnight last night. But yeah, I saw the game on TV.
It was also crazy hot at the game, so you got to miss that as well. But before the game, I went over to Hop Squad, and David Goss, who is on MLS's Extra Time podcast and does a lot of content for MLS, he was at Hop Squad there with a bachelor party, actually. Him and Bobby Warshaw were both there as part of a bachelor party. But I went over and talked to David Goss for a while, and he was very nice. A lot of fun to talk to. Made a real point to distance himself from Andrew Wiebe and his opinions about Austin. And so I thought that was funny. But yeah, Goss was a good dude. I was happy I got to catch up with him. But yeah, definitely wanted to distance himself from any of his companions and coworkers' opinions about Austin.
So did he ever say that he was just doing it for the social media engagement? He was that direct about it, or what?
That's exactly what Weeby's doing. Doing it for the engagement, and yeah, Goss didn't dispute that fact. But Goss also was one of the guys who called the GA Cup when Austin's teams were playing there. And so I got to talk to him about the youth team, and he's like, yeah, those kids are really good. And it's just they ended up kind of crashing out of that tournament. It's just the newer clubs don't have the depth. They don't have the years of this built up talent and experience in those tournaments, but he was really impressed by the academy team as well.
Well, that's good to hear. So I think we probably do have to spend some time talking about the game yesterday, though. So which you did see in person, and I imagine you sweat quite a bit because I know your seats are very sun heavy.
Yeah, I was afraid we were going to be in the sun the whole game because last year, I didn't think about this, but we didn't have a game at home this early last year, right? The first game was June 19th. And so I was like, I have no frame of reference for where the sun is going to set in this stadium at this time of day. But luckily, where we sit, the whole second half, we were in the shade. And I think most of the stadium was on the east side there. So that was a very welcome thing. But that first half was pretty brutal. It was around 100 degrees before the game started, and then slowly went down. But just the sun beating on you was pretty rough. But yeah, it ended up being a pretty ugly game. Austin FC, as we mentioned before, lost their first match at home of the season, right? And breaks a 4-game winning streak.
Yes, that's right. So it was our first big challenge, for better or worse, right? Against a team that's, I think what LA was third going in or fourth going in or something?
Third, I believe. Yeah.
They're going in. So, I guess this tests the narrative of whether Q2 is a fortress or not a little bit. Like we've talked about that, you do have to pick up a big win against a good team at home in order for that to really become a thing of truth. And, also Austin has shown the ability, this came up on the broadcast a lot, like we've shown the ability to rally after giving up a goal in previous matches, including as recently as against Houston. And this didn't, so I think a lot of people were waiting on it, and that did not come to pass.
Yeah. Looked a little bit better at times and a little more dangerous, a little more alive later on in the game. But yeah, nothing ever came out of it. Before we get too much in the game, let's mention the lineup. So I guess no real surprises. I guess there was one surprise with Jon Gallagher starting at left back. After the Houston game, Wolf mentioned that he planned for Kolmanich to start at left back, but he was sick, and so Gallagher started. So I kind of expected Kolmanich to start this game because it seems like, okay, Kolmanich is still the preferred starter. Lineups come out and Gallagher's there. And I think Chris Bills tweeted this, and I was thinking the exact same thing. It was like, is Jon Gallagher the starting left back now? Like, is he the guy now? And like, I think he has a good case for it. Like, I think as far as performances go and just like utility for what he's done for the team, I think maybe he should be the starting left back now.
Yeah, and when we got to the end of the game, I think there were some people who were thinking that he should be maybe the starter at left back or right wing or, a number of other positions across the field. At some point, he played did he play like 9 for a little bit?
No, he was playing left wing.
He was playing left wing.
In the game.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll get into that a little bit later on, but the rest of the lineup, it was Nick Lima at right back, Cascante and Gabrielson center backs. And then the rest of the lineup was what you'd expect. So Pereira, Ring, Driussi in the midfield, Finley, Urruti, Fagundes up top. And then Andrew Tarbell still starting at keeper for the injured Brad Stuver. Like I said, it was an ugly game. Chris Bills noted this in his post-game article, but a quote from there were a lot fewer vertical passes and long cross-field switches from fullbacks that have fueled many of the attacking moves all season. And if you look at Jeremiah, you included the passing network map that MLS Soccer puts on their website. You can see that in it, right? There's less of the kind of the connections we've come to get used to seeing on this passing network aren't there. It's more of that horseshoe of sadness is kind of the thickest line.
Yeah, Devin's horseshoe of sadness. Yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of that credit there goes to Greg Vanney, the coach, and LA Galaxy. They were playing with really compact lines. And so I think that's the thing that probably a lot of soccer fans have heard people say, playing compact, but maybe don't know exactly what it means. So essentially, like looking at where your back line sets up and how, like the distance to the forwards who are kind of setting the line of confrontation and leading that press if they're pressing. So the Galaxy were not pressing super high. They were pressing on certain triggers or like on goal kicks and things like that. But for the most part, we're not just like all out pressing. But at the same time, their back line was set up fairly high. And so the distance between that back line and their forwards was really tight. And so the way that Austin attacks in a 4-3-3 and then defends in more of a 4-4-2, they were defending in a 4-3-3. And I think the US national team does this a lot, where they'll defend in that 4-3-3 and those two lines of three will just kind of shift over to the side that the ball is on. And so because they were so compact, there wasn't a lot of room for Driussi and Ring to kind of drop into those pockets and receive the ball. Whenever they would drop in, the Galaxy did a good job of kind of squeezing in on them and not giving them any space to either receive, or if they did receive the ball, to not really do much with it after that. Also, what they were doing is we like to play that pass out to Diego on the touch line and then have him kind of cut back in. And on those moments, they did a really good job of kind of squeezing our players up against the sideline there. And so I think a lot of credit does go to Galaxy's defending. That being said, Austin's passing was really poor. Their execution was really poor.
Yeah, I saw a lot of that. A lot of just, it was like everybody was overhitting every ball, right? I mean, it was just so heavy for whatever reason.
And that's one of the keys. Like whenever, if they're playing a high line like that, one of the things you can do to either beat them or just to get them to play a little bit more honestly and back off a little is to find that ball over the top. And so Finley was making these runs that were there and we couldn't find him. They'd hit it way too long and it'd go into the keeper or go out of bounds or go like past the goal or out of bounds to the side. It was there and it was on, but we just couldn't get him the ball. And then when we did find Finley, not necessarily on those longer balls, but when we did find Finley wide, I feel like he was a little bit slow playing the ball, waiting for guys to come instead of just like taking a guy on. And I didn't think he had a really strong game on the ball. I think he did some other stuff that was useful at times, but on the ball, I didn't think Finley was super effective.
Yeah, and there's a lot of criticism, particularly of Alex Ring, and his which, I mean, there's been a lot of criticism of Alex Ring, I think, during the year, and we've talked about how maybe some of it's deserved or not deserved, but I think particularly in this match, I feel like it was deserved, just in the way that he was overhitting balls, and he seemed like he was overhitting balls and making a lot of bad decisions. I don't know if that's what you observed.
Yeah, I've mentioned my friend Ramon Ramirez on the show several times, but he made a good observation in a group chat that I'm in with him, saying that it seemed like Ring was frustrated that things weren't going well and tried to kind of take the game over, like reverted to like early 2021 Alex Ring, where like, okay, I have to do everything. And in that mindset was trying to do too much at times. And then, heavy touches, bad passes. He had a pretty good header opportunity that he hit high, didn't even get on target. And then like had less opportunity. I think the Galaxy defense kind of thwarted any of the other stuff that he does well. And so, although I do think Alex Ring is a good player, we didn't get to see any of those other good things. So like the balance was off from like the good to bad ratio. And so the bad stuff was like the much more important stuff that happened in this game with Alex Ring.
Yeah, and definitely more visible. So let's talk about the first goal, because like this comes from a poor clearance from Finley, but initially I thought I thought he was going to play the ball out well. And I don't know if I have like awful depth perception or whatever, but it was like, oh, look, Finley's going to boot the ball out of there. And then I was like, oh, wait, he's actually booting it right to this guy.
Yeah, it was really weird. I don't really understand what he was trying to do. And like every time I watch the replay, I think he's trying to do something different. But so it's like a long sequence of play where the ball gets recycled a few times, but it ends up with Douglas Costa out on the left wing. Finley like bodies him and picks his pocket and just takes the ball off of him. And this Douglas Costa used to start for Bayern Munich like not that long ago. And he's fallen pretty far. He's not that same player, but Finley just picks his pocket and takes it off, turns, look, he's like winds up to like hit the ball hard, it seems like. But then the way the ball actually goes, Alex Ring is there, but he plays it a little too hot for it to even be aimed at Alex Ring. Urruti was dropping in, so maybe he was playing it there. He also could have been trying to boot it. Whatever he was trying to do, he scuffs it. And it goes over Alex Ring's head, falls directly to Marquis Delgado. Nobody closes him down, and I'm not sure necessarily who should have. So Urruti was chasing him from behind. Ring, I think he felt like maybe he was a little too far away, and so just kind of jogged, didn't really push to close him down. And then Danny was at the top of the box, and he starts approaching him, but the way he's moving it feels more like he thinks that Delgado is just going to kind of dribble across the top of the box and look to play it off. But because nobody closes him, he takes a hit and hits it really well. And from the angle I saw it at, I thought that Tarbell just like absolutely fluffed it. But upon replay, like, I think you could maybe argue that he could have reacted a little faster. It also looks like he may have been a little bit blind to the shot and didn't see it until a little bit late. In any case, Delgado strikes it really well and just kind of tucks it right into that near post there. But
did it go off the near post and then in?
Yeah, I think it dinked it. Like it was always going in, but it did hit the post. But yeah, really poor from Austin there. I was like less deflated by it than I would have been last year because we've come back this year on a few occasions already. And I think like the fight was there. It seemed like the intensity picked up after that by Austin and the fight was there, but the execution just continued to be poor for the entire game. And Galaxy immediately started time wasting after that goal.
That was crazy. Yeah. The keeper like taking laps around the field in between
minute.
Yeah.
It's the 7th minute and you're wasting time already. It was frustrating, but it worked. But yeah, the keeper got a yellow card for wasting time. And I've never seen a keeper get a second yellow for wasting time also, but I kind of thought we might.
You thought you might get there with how much time he was wasting? Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, so really frustrating. Chicharito ends up missing a chance right at the end of the first half that easily could have made it 2-0. Austin tries to play an offside line. Cabral just beats it. And so they're all like out of position with Cabral past the back line. And they're all just sprinting to catch up. And Chicharito is running towards the back post. Cabral plays that early cross in. And I think it was Cascante was the nearest player to him. And he jumps up in the air and tries to get it. But Chicharito gets to the ball like, I don't know, a yard, 2 yards from goal. And somehow manages to hit it over the top bar. Thankfully, he hit it over the top bar, but he very, very much should have buried that one and made it 2-0.
Well, I think the only good thing we could take out of this is for the long-term Chicharito haters, that at least he did not pick up a goal. This one, he had that opportunity. I feel like he had maybe one more pretty good one too, where he could have made it 2-0, and he just didn't convert on shots that he usually does.
And there's we have one where he received it in the box, but I think it was
Nick Lima did it. Nick Lima did a good job of poking a ball away from him once too. And I thought Nick Lima had a good game, and we've had questions about some questions about how he's doing. I thought he looked good yesterday.
I thought the back line was overall like pretty good actually. For the most part, I think there's still some questionable things, but overall, I thought Ruben had a really solid game. There's a moment where I can't remember which Galaxy player had it, but it was essentially the ball gets loose and it's one Austin defender, one Galaxy attacker, both sprinting towards Austin's goal. And Ruben fights this guy off the ball and wins it. And it was like, that's the center back we needed last year, is a guy who can like just out athlete somebody, just like run with them at least fast enough to stay with the guy carrying the ball, body him off, turn and play the ball forward. And we didn't have anybody who could do that last year. And so like that was really encouraging to me. And then also I feel like he's making better decisions on the ball as well as games go by. So I was impressed with Ruben. I thought Julio for the most part did a good job. Gallagher again was really solid. I didn't think a lot of our woes had anything to do with him. So yeah, I think the back line was solid. Wolf was yelling at one point in the broadcast when I rewatched, you can hear Wolf yelling, "Speed, Julio, speed." And I think he wanted him to play faster. And it did feel like we were playing a little bit slow, which I think the horseshoe of sadness comes in there. Like that's what it looks like when we play slow. And I think part of it was because we couldn't find those lanes inside to play the ball. We couldn't find those crossfield switches for the fullbacks to play. And so they just didn't know what to do, and we're just playing it really slowly. And then whenever we did progress it, they just kick it out of bounds or kick it into the south stand or whatever. But I didn't write down the time here. What do you know what time the first subs were made?
Why, yes, they were 68.
The 68th minute. Okay, so Kolmanic and Redes were coming on, and I was surprised to see that they came on for Urruti and Finley. And so I was like, okay, what are we about to see here? So we ended up shifting to a 4-4-2, and it was Kolmanic at left back. Jon Gallagher moved up to left wing. Redes went to the right wing, and then we had Diego and Driussi up top as two like dual strikers. I took my friend Brian to the game, and he was like, why are they doing this? Like, why wouldn't you put on another striker? And I think the logic here is that Finley wasn't getting Urruti wasn't getting on the ball anyway, and was dropping in more and more as the game went on to try to get on the ball. My guess is that if you're going to have somebody dropping in the midfield to get on the ball anyway, you might as well have your two best guys on the ball be the ones doing that. I don't know if it fully worked or not, but Diego did get on the ball there centrally a few times during that time. It didn't ever come to anything, but I think that's probably the logic behind that is these are the players we have available. This is what we're seeing. Let's try to get those two guys on the ball more.
Well, we did see a little bit, like we had some decent chances after that happened late in the second half, right? Because like Gabrielson, it's a cross where I thought Ruben was going to score, which would have been nice. That was like at 75. Do you see like the Driussi free kick, which was close to the end of the match?
Yeah,
it hit the post, but
hit
like
the post. Yeah,
I don't know if the physics would have worked for that to hit out to like be outside the wall and inside the post or not. But it was a hell of an attempt.
Yeah, I didn't see the replay of that angle of that kick from a different angle, but from where we were in our seats, the same friend Brian looked over to me and said, "What do they do on this?" And I said, "Kolmanic is going to float it backside to Julio's head, and he's going to try to play it back across." And then right then, Driussi steps up and smacks it and hits the post. I was like, "Well, I was wrong."
Well, it was beautiful. I mean, it's like the only Driussi out of everybody on the team could even make that attempt, and definitely only make that and make it close. And then Danny Houston had one right before 92. So when he eventually got in, he did make a difference. It had a little back heel that I think it was our highest X goal attempt of the match was that one, which he didn't convert, but it would have been a beautiful goal if he did. I want to see that guy score. It would be like,
I know, I do too.
So good for him, especially at home. You know, it would be so good for him and so good for the fans. I think people are ready to like embrace like Danny Houston redemption story.
Yeah, he deserved it. He caught a lot of flack he didn't deserve last year, including from us probably.
Well, I didn't want it. No, it's fine. Nobody listens to the archives, so it's okay.
All right. So another sub that came on later on is Rodney Redes. We just mentioned Redes. He came on early on. So Chris Bills was giving Redes some love in his post-game article. So he lists that Rodney completed 100% of his passes. He won 80% of his duels. He made some good runs, was kind of stretching the back line, and then drew a foul. He drew that foul that Driussi ended up hitting the post on the free kick on. I agree with all that. I think Rodney did some dangerous stuff, and Bills was even going to the point to say like maybe Rodney starts the next game, like maybe that's the next thing. I will also point out that every time Rodney touched the ball, I did not really have any confidence that he was going to do anything.
He was going to do anything, right?
Dangerous with it. And I don't know. I agree with this stuff that he did good. Like he runs a lot. He works really hard. I don't think his pressing was super effective defensively. He seemed to just be kind of like sprinting from one spot to another, as opposed to, I think Maxi and Driussi now have a good understanding of like angles to take and when to run where to really cut off passing lanes. And it looks like Rodney's just kind of like, the ball's there, I'm going to sprint to it. Okay, it's here now, I'm going to sprint to it. And they're just passing it around him back and forth. And so I don't like his pressing. I don't think he has a good touch. He doesn't pass the ball that well, although he completed 100% of his passes. Duels, though, that's a spot where Rodney's strong. He'll get in there and fight, work really hard, battle with guys, but that doesn't score goals. I don't want to see Rodney starting on the right wing.
Wow, I was ready to have I was more along the line with Bills, and maybe it's because I didn't. It might have been because I already knew what was going to happen. Like I said, when I watched it, so I was like looking for the good in Rodney. But I mean, I thought he was the. I think he ate some minutes and like in the aggregate was like better than nothing. So like, it's a pretty good Rodney outing.
Yeah, you don't need people to eat minutes when you're losing, though.
I know. Well, that goes back to, last week we were talking about depth. We talked about the Houston match, and we said, like, we feel like we didn't have the depth. We have the depth when you're tied or ahead to, like, finish out a game. But if you're trailing, we don't have the depth to, like, bring in people who are going to make a difference. And I definitely think that this game was an illustration of that. Like, yeah, Rodney and Owen Wolf are wonderful people and work hard, but they are not going to pull victory from the jaws of defeat.
Yeah. We have Patreon questions. We're going to answer some more Patreon questions later in the show, but there's one that I thought was apt now. It's Kevin Kavanaugh asks, what do you think of Gallagher getting minutes back at winger, again, given the Cecilio situation and how underwhelming that position has been outside of Fagundes? So, he got minutes at winger last night. Wolf was asked about it in the press conference and acted like, yeah, we're open to it. Like, he's been good at fullback, but didn't, like, say, like, no, we're not going to play him at winger. I think that would be my preferred spot because we do have a good backup at left back in Kolmanich. I would prefer to maybe see, like, if we do change things up a little, I think I'd rather see Gallagher get the minutes instead of Rodney.
But I guess to your point about not, I think you said this on Twitter about just not overreacting to 1 week. I mean, we just talked to Jon Gallagher last week about his move to fullback.
Yeah,
and then we have one bad outing at home. We're like, oh, maybe he should be a winger again. Or that seems to be a lot of the thoughts that people have.
I agree. And I'm less basing it on 1 week of Gallagher at winger and more so basing it on several weeks of Finley.
Ethan Finley at winger? Okay,
winger.
That's fair.
Because he's not been super effective. He had those 2 good games coming off the bench, and since then he's not really done a lot to help the team score more goals or get in really good positions. He's done some things, and he has those moments where he does good things. He had the assist to Danny against Houston, so he's capable of those things at times. But against a tough defense last night, he just seemed to play too slow and was too ineffective at like making dangerous things happen.
So if I'd actually listened to you, I guess it was really, if given Kolmanich, Gallagher, and Finley, if you have to play 2, you would play Kolmanich and Gallagher, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think that's the way I see it.
Yeah.
And not so much even starting him there, but like if the options are subbing off Finley, I think he's still probably the best option we have. But if you're subbing someone off, like I'd almost say like, okay, put Kolmanich on and move Gallagher up top. Like, I don't know. I don't envy Wolf right now making those decisions, but so statistics wise, possession ended up 55-45 in favor of Austin. The expected goals, so my wife Ashley is learning about these stats and what they mean and like how they're relevant to a game. So she asked me as we were walking out of the stadium, like, who do you think had higher XG in this game? I was like, I honestly don't know, because the shots ended up, Austin had more shots. It was 13-9, but they only had 2 on target as opposed to the Galaxy's 3 on target. And so looking at it, the XG ended up 1.2 to 1.1 in favor of Austin. Did we have higher XG?
Yeah, we did. We did. But I mean, point 3 of that.
1, yeah,
0.3 of that came from that Houston chance. So there was a big chunk of the total XG in the game, but we ended up higher overall.
Yeah, and then I think the Alex Ring header had a decently high number, maybe a 30%. And I think there's a Fagundes header opportunity that I don't think he actually touched, and so it didn't count in the XG model. And then Gabrielson's ended up getting called offside, so that didn't count to the XG model either. So I think ours probably would have been a little bit higher had some things broken a slightly different way, but we just barely beat them. But in any case, not many opportunities for either team, which goes to why we're saying this is an ugly game.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was not, and I don't know if it was, I mean, the heat may have had something to do with it for both teams, but it just seemed slow and not beautiful soccer from start to finish.
Yeah. All right. Anything else we want to cover on this before we take a break, Jeremiah?
I think that feels like enough to talk about before we take a break.
All right. Well, we will take a quick break. We're going to be right back with Jessica Luther. She's going to talk to us about the Cecilio Dominguez situation, which she wrote a really great article for the Striker Texas a couple of weeks ago, which you should all go check out. So hang tight and we'll be right back.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by Austin Daily Drop, which is a gathering of local news stories. They're impactful and interesting, served up in a quick digest format. From Chris Mosier, who is a longtime trusted Austin broadcasting veteran. He's been in the Austin media since 1993, which is as long as I've been in Austin.
The Austin Daily Drop covers everything from city government to local business to sports to live music. Just kind of the news that he finds interesting personally, doesn't put any opinion into it, no editorializing, just kind of the facts, and then gives resources that you can go, if you do hear something that is interesting to you, you can go find that resource and read more about it. But yeah, I've been listening to it for the last several weeks, and I really do like it a lot.
Chris posts the pod Monday to Friday by 8 a.m., usually runs between 8 and 10 minutes long, which is the length of a short commute. That was a very short commute or a shower, so I think I'll go with that in terms of timing. Summed up, the Austin Daily Drop is a quick, easy, and reliable way to be up to speed about everything happening in Austin that you need to know.
Give Chris 10 minutes and he'll give you Austin. Jeremiah, you're going to do a Spartan race, aren't you?
I am going to do a Spartan race, and it was interesting. So we get this ad copy from the Spartan folks, and they're talking about, so these races involve like both running and obstacles. And I hadn't really paid a lot of attention to the obstacles, but apparently spear throwing is one of the things you have to do. So I don't. Hopefully, spear catching is not on the other end of that. But now I am both.
No.
I'm both equally excited and terrified by the opportunity to run the Spartan race in Austin on May 21st.
Yeah, so Jeremiah will be running it. And if you would like to be on Team Moon Tower Soccer with Jeremiah, I will not be doing it. I got my toe smashed playing soccer this weekend, and I cannot put a shoe on right now. But if you want to be on Team Moon Tower Soccer for the Spartan race, all you need to do is post a video of yourself training for your Spartan race, and then use the hashtag Spartan Training, tag at Spartan, and then tag us at Moon Tower Soccer. And then for posterity, if you're doing it like on a story or something, send us a screen grab so we remember to send this to you. But if you do all these things, we're going to send you a code that will get you into this race for free.
Yeah, I think there are two interesting things about that. I had not thought about training for it, so like reading this copy reminded me I should probably try to do something. And also these things are like, I think it's like $120 for the race. So like a free code is a valuable code if you're into it. So I would definitely encourage you to post a video online, tag at Spartan, and tag us, and hopefully I'll see you out there.
All right. This week, our guest is Jessica Luther, who is an investigative journalist, an author, a podcaster. Her work has appeared in ESPN The Magazine, New York Times Magazine, The Texas Observer, The Austin Chronicle, Sports Illustrated, Texas Monthly, Vice Sports, and Guardian Sport, among other places. And she recently wrote an article about the Cecilio Dominguez situation for the Striker Texas. Jessica, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I love this podcast. So this is really fun for me to be on it.
Oh,
even for this reason.
We are very honored to have like a real journalist on the show, but even more honored to have one that actually listens to the show. And so you reached out not long ago, and just to say like, hey, I enjoy the show. And Jeremiah and I were talking about like, we need to find a way to have her on. And I was like, I don't really know.
Oh, so you're the one that jinxed us all.
I am.
I know.
It's my fault.
Yeah, Landon's. We weren't that cool. We were both like, holy shit, Jessica Luther listens to the show. I think pretty sure that was our actual reaction.
And I was like, I just don't like, we try to keep the show pretty focused, like on like Austin FC stuff. And it was like, I don't know how, like what it is, but let's think about it and see if we can find a way to get her on the show. And then this happened, and Jessica reached out again and said, hey, if you need someone to talk about domestic violence on your show, I'm available.
Yeah.
I was like, thank you so much, because
I did that like when the suspension was first announced, and I said that my gut told me we were going in a certain direction. And if we did, yeah. Ugh.
But we appreciate you offering your expertise, even though it's not the most fun subject to talk about. We're thankful to have you here.
Well, I am excited to be here. This is great.
So some of our listeners may not know you by name necessarily, but I'm sure the ripples of your work will at the very least have come onto their radar by way of the Baylor sexual assault cases several years ago. You wrote one of the bigger and earlier pieces on that. Is that right?
Yeah, that's accurate. My friend Dan Solomon, who I report a lot with, we wrote a piece. Like our lives are before and after Baylor. So we have this down pat now. It was August 20th, 2015. And we were the first national outlet to report on a Baylor football player on trial for sexual assault. We did it that morning. He was convicted that evening. And then on Saturday morning, I was on SportsCenter, and it kind of took off from there, and it led our piece. Ken Starr, who was the president of Baylor at the time, at some point gave us credit for the fact that he had hired the outside investigators who actually came in and eventually led to Art Briles losing his job there and sort of all the fallout that most people know about. But yeah, we wrote the first big piece, and then he and I wrote a follow-up for Deadspin 2 or 3 years later. That was years in the making of sort of the whole thing. That we had heard about Briles and Baylor and all that sort of stuff. But I'll also say, this is so weird. I don't like to tout myself, but just in case, like the other stuff people know me for is I wrote a big piece about the Dallas Mavericks on the business side, sexual harassment and domestic violence with John Wertheim at Sports Illustrated in 2018, that Mark Cuban very famously went on the jump with Rachel Nichols and was like, it's all true, which was really useful to us. And then most recently, I worked with a team at USA Today to report on LSU and all this sexual assault, gendered violence in their athletic department. And that even rippled out, and Les Miles lost his job at Kansas for stuff he had done while at LSU. So those are my big three.
And you're also the author of 2 books, the first of which is called, it's Unsportsmanlike Conduct, College Football, and the Politics of Rape. And the second one is Loving Sports When They Don't Love You Back, Dilemmas of the Modern Sports Fan. And so
which seems fitting right now. Yeah.
Right.
So I was able to read, I didn't get to read the whole thing, but I did read the chapter of Loving Sports When They Don't Love You Back titled Rooting for Your Team When the Star is Accused of Domestic Violence. So this is not the first time you've thought about this, or this has affected you personally as a sports fan.
Right, correct. So Unsportsmanlike Conduct, which came out in 2016, my original writing on all of this was born from the fact that my parents went to Florida State. It was the only school I applied to go to. I wanted to watch Florida State football games, and I did. I met my husband there. We went to Florida State football games together. They won the national championship while we were there. And I started writing on the intersection of gendered violence in sports when Jameis Winston in 2013, our quarterback who won the Heisman and the national championship, it came out that he had been under investigation for 11 months at that point for sexual assault. And that's when I started really, my first writing on this was grappling as a fan, as a long time fan of a team. And then that morphed into actually doing investigative journalism over time.
I feel like this has been just it's been a very heavy week for Austin FC fans, right? Because what's going on. And for me, and part my experience is probably I'm too much of an online guy. So I read everything on Reddit and everything on Twitter, and it's all
I don't read
awful
Reddit, but I read a lot of the other stuff
and confusing and terrible. But that has that been your experience? And what would you say to people who are a lot of us are going through this right now?
Oh, you're maybe we shouldn't have invited her. I tend to
no. Tell me what to think, Jessica. That's really what I want.
I just think there's no good answers to any of this. A lot of the time I just feel bad about how other people react to these issues. So Lee Goodmark, who I interviewed for the Striker piece, I had interviewed her before I did a piece for Spinsters, the basketball podcast, about the NBA and domestic violence. And I had interviewed Lee for that. And in that discussion, we talked about, and this is totally relevant to whatever is about to happen with Dominguez and Austin FC. We talked about the fact that there are people who cheer for these players when they come back from these moments. We were specifically talking about Antonio Brown, who's an NFLer, but and how bad that part of it in particular feels, that they're cheering for him because he had been reported for domestic violence or sexual assault and not arrested or charged or found guilty. And she said this thing to me about how that's particularly painful because you come to realize that the people in your community don't agree that what has happened is bad. Like, you see it as a problem, you see it as harm, you see it as something you want to mitigate, something that you want to see fixed, and you realize that the people you might be standing shoulder to shoulder with don't view it that way. And that's its own particular kind of pain that you're trying to deal with as part of a community. And I don't feel like I have a good answer for how to get through that other than to recognize that that's what's happening, and maybe just be sad about it, and know that lots of people are coming at this from all different kinds of positions and knowledge and understanding. And I think one thing I've seen people talking about is like, there's always going to be the guys, maybe some women, but a lot of the guys who are like, soccer's my apolitical place. I just go there for fun. I don't want to think about all these things. And I so relate to that. Tennis is my most favorite sport. Sorry, soccer, but tennis is my most favorite sport. And there's a chapter in Loving Sports about tennis. And that was hard for me to write because I just am like, I don't want to know anything. Just let me watch them play tennis so I don't have to bring anything with me to that space. I so relate to that. And I recognize that that's where some people are starting this process. It still hurts like hell though. Like it feels so strange. Like, one thing I've had to come to terms with is that there are people who just like hate me because of the work that I do, and I can't do anything about that. And I'm like, what did they hate? That I am like anti-sexual assault, that I'm anti-domestic violence? Like, how do I make sense of that for myself? Because that you would think we would all agree on that. And I think the fact that we don't all agree on something that might seem clear to us hurts. So I wish that I could tell everyone like how to like buck up and get through this. But I think just recognizing that these are the dynamics at play, and like that you're going to feel bad and sad. And so are those people. I mean, the people who are on the quote unquote other side of this from us, they feel bad, and that's part of what they're reacting to. And I kind of just think that's good that they might feel a little bad. Sorry.
So
not sorry.
Before we ask you to answer any more of life's difficult questions, let's get to some of the facts around the Cecilia Dominguez situation. So what things do we know that are relevant to this case right now? So
for me, it's relevant that the same person that we're about to talk about from 2022 reported him for physical violence in Paraguay in 2016. And I will say that we don't know what happened to all those charges. This has been like a journalist thing, is trying to figure out how to say this correctly. I have a very good friend. I actually do Burn It All Down, this podcast, with her, and she studies Latin American soccer. And when I told her about this, she has tried valiantly to figure out what happened to those charges. And there's just, the Paraguayan media has never said. So we don't know if they were dropped. We just know from the outside that it appears he was never punished, but the descriptions of violence are pretty terrible. The physical violence that she says he did to her. And then on April 8th this year, APD went to her house. It's not totally clear how that all happened, like how APD itself found out, but something like a possible domestic violence victim. They went with APD's victim services that included a City of Austin counselor. So it looks like she works for the city and not for APD itself. And she was the only one who seems to have interacted with the woman at the center of this, who is Dominguez's ex-partner. And that woman says that she was not physically harmed, that there might have been verbal and mental abuse. I will say, reading the police report, she appears to be worried about him and the potential, but is adamant that nothing physical had happened. Doesn't want charges brought up. She's concerned about her immigration status, about her family, about him being able to continue to play. She doesn't seem to want the authorities there. When they got there, there were 2 Austin FC people already in the house, including a sports psychologist. And then with the counselor, they created a safety plan that involved leaving someone from the a woman from the Austin FC community. It's not clear she worked for the team or if she's a girlfriend or wife of someone else with her. So there was a concern of creating a safety plan. And then MLS investigated, and they investigated this this part of it, right? They didn't investigate. They couldn't nail down anything from 2016.
Chris Bills reported in an article that came out after your piece that the league attempted to retrieve documentation from that incident, but were unable to for whatever reason.
Yeah, okay. And so they they were only able to investigate this latest. There is no. They found that there was no physical violence. They didn't. They decided that he didn't deserve any kind of punishment. The team cannot punish him on top of or in addition to whatever the MLS decides as a league, except that the MLS did say that he has to go to counseling. And Chris reported that is whoever's doing the counseling is not part of the team, is not part of the league. Like it's a third party,
right,
which is good.
Provided
opinion.
through the it's called the substance abuse and something behavior program through MLS. But yeah, the counseling to both to Dominguez and that's being offered to his partner will be an independent party through all of that.
Yeah. So that's another indication that whatever happened here was not good. But it isn't bad enough under like the CBA to punish him in a way that maybe there are some people wish that he could be punished. And APD very quickly told ESPN, like ESPN reported in like 8 different ways within 4 sentences that APD is not doing a criminal investigation here, which was no surprise to me. I don't ever expect one. So if there ever is one, that's more of a surprise to me than anything. And the fact that she wasn't reporting, she didn't even want to do a protective order against him when that was offered to her, which again, it's so hard with intimate partner violence. Like one of the reasons I reached out to Lee Goodmark, who has been working with domestic violence victims for 20 years, professor at the University of Maryland, wrote a book called Decriminalizing Domestic Violence, because it's so complicated because their lives are so intertwined in ways that make all of the choices that are being made there's only so many things that you can really do here. And so that's complicated, and there are family dynamics, and there are feelings, and there are histories, and really, I'm always much more surprised when things move through the law enforcement system than not, because that's often very difficult for the victim as much as the person who's harmed, but certainly that's a really difficult thing often for the victim when we're talking about intimate partner violence.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to ask you is that I actually had people say to me, like, it's people who aren't following the situation as closely as I am and maybe don't know all the details. They know that there was a report and then he wasn't charged and reinstated. That's pretty much all they know. And so some people with that information have come to me and said, well, if the police didn't charge him, then like, what's the big deal? What's the problem? And what you just said, I think, is the big deal, is that...
And I will just say, like, we have no good systems in place for accountability around gendered violence. Like anywhere you look that might have some sort of accountability. This is true. Like I often do college level where we're talking about Title IX enforcement on top of law enforcement. Like, there are no good systems of accountability in our culture. Like we are not a very friendly culture to victims of gendered violence. We have not set up systems to hold people accountable for that kind of harm. Law enforcement's not great at this. I mean, this is the kind of moment where you're like, go look up the stats. But I mean, there are wild statistics about like police officers have a 40% rate of being domestic abusers themselves. In my piece, I wrote about an APD officer who recently has gotten in trouble for helping a man. Like he gave him a note to tell him to go inside the house because he just didn't think it was serious enough what this woman had reported. And he helped this man get out of being arrested for domestic violence, like on the scene. And so you hear all kinds of stories from victims if you actually talk to them or read about what they say. We're like interacting with agents of the state is often terrible. That is not a choice that they're willing to make, in large part because they know that it puts them in more danger. Women are more likely to be killed at the point when they leave an abusive partner than at any other point in that relationship. They're well aware of this dynamic of the possible retaliation that they'll receive for going to the authorities. They can't trust the authorities to take them seriously and to actually help protect them. And then most of the time, if it gets past the cops, then it ends up in the hands of DAs who don't feel like there's enough evidence and they don't want to prosecute. And then on top of all of that is the stuff I just talked about like how these are families. Like, think about if you're going to like get in a fight with your mother, like how much stress that puts on you if you're going to like bring up conflict at the Thanksgiving dinner table, right? And we're talking about a relationship where she's reported him for physical abuse in the past, and they have a child together, and they have all this life that's intertwined. Finances are intertwined. All of that together. Victims are like hyper aware of these things in ways that we will never be, right? And those are how that within that system, they're making choices. You just can't ever be surprised by whatever choice someone decides to make under those constrained circumstances.
And I think that's the other, like, kind of the other pushback I've heard. It's like, well, she doesn't want anything else to happen. Like, so why should anybody else demand any extra accountability or demand any, expect more from the club or the league or anything like that? Because you've done a good job. I don't know if you want to add on to that, because I feel like you've done a good job of covering it, but I think people don't appreciate
have something
that.
To say
okay,
about
I
that,
thought
Jeremiah.
You might.
And I do think that, again, I just think this is complicated. Like, I do think the fact that we know anything about what she wants is pretty rare. A lot of the time, as the public, we have no real sense of like what the person harmed actually wants out of this process. And so for that, I feel even a little bit grateful that we have some sense of that. And part of what she doesn't want is him to be punished, that she wants him to be able to keep his job. And I think that's complicated because as a fan, I don't look forward to the day when he takes the pitch again. And again, that people will cheer for him simply because he was not convicted of domestic violence. This runs straight into the fact that like Austin FC absolutely is a part of this community, and is not simply because the community has embraced them, but because they have put themselves into the community. Like, part of the business that they are in is creating community and being in this. And in that sense, and I think this about any professional sports team, but wow, do I feel it now that I've like decided to be a fan of this team and to watch it like in action. I do think they have a huge commitment to this community. They promise a lot of stuff to and want a lot of stuff from. And that's not necessarily going to be easy to square all the time with what we understand from this woman. And we probably will never understand anything else from her. Like, I would be shocked if we learn anything else at this point. But I can't deny that I do think that the team has to understand that they have a position in this community, and that they can't just, the idea that they can just be neutral in the face of this. I don't know. That just seems really unfair to me after all they have asked of the people of Austin. And I think this is, I know I use the word complicated a lot, but like, they brought him here after 2016. And I know that Wolf has said that he didn't know about it. And I know the team can only say so much in general. I understand that this is all, there's the CBA and they can't punish him anymore and they have to be very careful. And I recognize all those things. I also am a super cynical person about people in power around issues of gendered violence, because they have taught me to be in all the work that I have done. And the idea that like no one in that organization Googled him before he got here, that one's hard for me. And I hope in the future we can get more answers about how all of that happened. And if they for real did not Google him, I would like to understand how that happened. And I think that they do have to, like, I mean, this reminds me of when the Cowboys brought Greg Hardy in and Jerry Jones said all the dumb, can I curse on this? Do you guys curse?
Sure. I'll bleep it maybe, but go
okay.
for it.
All the dumb shit that Jerry Jones said about like Greg Hardy's a new guy or whatever. And of course he then like beat up a coach or whatever on the sideline. He was the same person he always was. And I'm like, you brought him into the community like on purpose to play football for you. Like you owe that community something with that choice. And I feel that here with Dominguez as well. The fact that this was not new information, and I won't say that part. Yeah.
Oh, I was just that's interesting you brought the Cowboys up, because I was just going to say, as a lifelong Cowboys fan and a obviously newish Austin FC fan, like I kind of expect the Cowboys to do like mean, awful, big business kind of things, you know? And like to your point about the community, like a big part of Austin FC and soccer in general is like this real sense of being a part of a thing that's bigger than us that you don't get from
the team
Dallas
is
Cowboys.
Here because people because the community put an effort out to get a team here. Yeah. It's
so, I don't. Yeah, it's like, oh no, I just think like we should have higher expectations for them than I have for Jerry Jones. That's
yeah.
I just want to agree with that point.
And like we're all creating it anew, right? Like this is one of the exciting things about soccer culture in general in the US is like that soccer is not the sport. So you do get different kinds of fans, which I like. But also it's newish here, right? Like Austin FC is from the ground up. It's only a year and a half old. We can create something great, right? And we can do it now. And I think that is exciting. And I want to see the team participate in that. At the same time, I totally recognize, like when Bills and I were talking or texting about like, poor Bills. Chris Bills is so patient because he's just getting like text messages from me like, can you ask this? Can you ask this? Ask this person this. This is what I want to know. And he's always very nice about it. And like, I'm telling him the things I want to know, knowing very well that like the team can only say so much. And I recognize I'm not unreasonable. I'm a little bit unreasonable, but I'm not totally unreasonable. So I get that they are in some ways the public face of what they can say and do here is really limited. But, I hope moving forward, my fear about all these kinds of things is that say he does leave in the transfer period this summer, maybe he gets on the pitch a couple times, he does well, they're able to transfer him, like whatever. Landon can tell me more about like the logistics of that. That's what I listened to Moon Tower for. It can't be the end of the discussion, even if the central figure leaves the team, because he won't be the last one. And I knew that. I mean, I wrote about this in my piece. Like, as soon as I became a fan of this team, I was like, one day I'm going to have to write a piece about. Actually, my greatest fear was that I would be the reporter that would be told the tip and I would have to like investigate the team. So in that sense, at least it didn't personally, that's a terrible thing. But this was always a reality. Like this will happen again. This will absolutely happen again, because we just live in a society that where gendered violence is ubiquitous. So the statistics tell us that this will happen again.
So as you mentioned before, the collective bargaining agreement of MLS does not allow the club to further punish Cecilio Dominguez. I imagine Josh Wolf he's still the coach. He'll be able to choose whether or not the guy gets on the field. But as far as keeping him out of training and things like that, they don't really have any recourse at this point. And
I think him not playing him without you have to be really careful. I think
I wouldn't be surprised.
To look like you are punishing him beyond what has already happened. I don't know. That's not my wheelhouse, but I do. The thing I'll say about the CBA is I'm pro-labor. I'm a big pro-labor person, and I love that CBAs exist. And this is like the one moment where you're like, okay, like. Yeah,
it's like take the good with the bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
it's their job to protect the players.
Yeah, like in any scenario to protect the players. And like this is one of the unfortunate sides of that.
Yeah, and it is what it is. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm interrupting you.
That's okay. Yeah, so both of the main supporters groups put out statements saying essentially condemning domestic violence, and then also saying that they do not support Dominguez returning to the field for Austin FC. So you just mentioned all the facts that we know, but like you said, it is complicated and there's some things that we don't know. Do you think we know enough to like outright condemn Cecilio Dominguez, to say that like, I don't want to see him on the field anymore? Like, is that a fair thing for a fan to say right now?
Yeah, I think so. I think the reporting from 2016 is pretty damning all by itself. And I understand that there are people who, no matter what, will only use law enforcement as the arbiter of whether or not, of whatever they feel about this guy. And I don't really even know what to say to people at this point who that's their decision-making tool. Okay, that's a lie. Because the thing I do say about that is that we all make choices constantly in our lives about the people around us and how we're going to interact with them or not interact with them. And we are not using the cops to do that all the time. Like, we can absolutely on our own decide that someone has a potential for harm or is not someone we want to be around. It's not someone we want to cheer for. We do that all the time in all kinds of ways that do not involve law enforcement. So the idea that that's the beginning and end of the conversation for me is always lacking. And then on top of that, all the stats about how rarely these cases lead to arrest charges and certainly not convictions.
And even if we were using like the legal standard, there are absolutely despicable things that people can do to other people that are not illegal.
Right. I mean, when I talked to Lee about this recent case, you know, the woman told the cops or the counselor she was worried that he would call her up and be like abusive on the phone, which is not, you know, I don't necessarily want people arrested for that. I have lots of feelings about people going to prison in general. Like, I'm not out here advocating all the time for people to like be arrested. But she told me like one thing about people who've been reported in the past is they then can draw lines. They can see like where the limit is, right? You do this and you get in trouble. You do this, you don't get in trouble. And we, you know, who knows what's at play. And so for me, certainly I think 2016 is enough. The alternative narrative there is that this woman has lied about all of those things. And I guess I will say the thing I say about this is like gendered violence cases, their false reporting is in the single digits in percentages. It's the same as any other crime. There's nothing special about it, except that we're super fixated on the idea that women lie all the time about this. And it's just not true. And so I think it's easier to accept that this is probably what happened, much more than that this lady lied and decided to go through the Paraguayan legal system. And then you couple that with like what we know from this recent incident, the fact that the MLS decided that counseling was necessary as part of whatever came out of that. If a fan doesn't want to cheer for this guy, if they don't want to see him on their team, sure. And I think also the other piece of that is like, if someone wants to cheer for this guy and a fan is not happy about that other fan, that's fine too. And I know that we don't like to have fights in the family, but you know, all those feelings seem super valid to me. I will not cheer. Right. I will not personally be cheering at any point.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us, Jessica. This is, we know it's like very complicated to talk about. You did so very eloquently. And I know you've helped me like kind of situate things in my mind as well, because it's hard. It's a hard place to be in as a fan, like you said. And so, yeah, thanks for doing that for us. And thanks for coming on and sharing some of your knowledge with us.
Yeah. Maybe next time we'll do something fun. I do want to say, I did go to the game yesterday with my friend Amira that I do Burn It All Down with. And I just want to say that I found those 10 minutes to be incredibly powerful. And
I didn't go, but I watched on TV and there was no doubt. Just, you could 100% absolutely tell that like things were very different.
And I try not to fight with people on Twitter anymore. I've been on there forever. But there were a couple dudes, journalists, who were saying like that the SGs should just not show up, like vote with your wallet and don't show up. And I pushed back, and they said that I deeply disagree with the idea that like, if you have a criticism of the FO, that you shouldn't occupy the space at the events. Like, that's just leaving the space to the people who don't have a criticism. And I'm clearly someone out here being a critic all the time. So, and I was going to the game. And
with the demand, those spots would be filled with, like you said, with people.
Well, yeah, you have to buy the,
like,
so in order to make that space empty, it would take incredible organizing time. It would take time to make that happen, a level of organizing, and it would actually take purchasing tickets and then not giving them to anyone else. And I think with a little bit of time that the supporters groups had, I found that to be a really powerful 10 minutes. And I didn't understand it was going to be 10 minutes. And Amir and I told Amir, I was like, they're going to be silent for a minute at the 10th minute. And then it like kept going. We're like, it's still going. I look forward to your analysis of whatever the hell happened yesterday. Cause it was rough. But the people who were saying that they lost because 10 minutes Lamurka didn't drum, I was like, I was there for the whole thing. And it was not those 10 minutes. So I'm not surprised by the people who have reacted with the kind of like, people have tweeted at me, Cecilio with exclamation points or whatever. I'm not surprised that people are reacting like that. That's so normal. It's heartening though to see at all that there is this kind of vocal opposition to domestic violence. I can't believe we're arguing about whether or not we should be vocally opposing that. So anyway, thank you to the supporters groups who did that yesterday. I found it to be very powerful.
So you mentioned your podcast, Burn It All Down. Where else do you want folks to find you and your work?
Nowhere. Don't come find me. No, that's not true. I'm on any of the social medias. I'm at Jessica W. Luther. JessicaWLuther.com is my website. That's not updated. But you can contact me there. If you want to yell at me, that's how you get to me. To yell at me is JessicaWLuther.com. But I'm mainly on Twitter and a little bit on Instagram. So that's it.
All right. Well, perfect. Jessica, thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. We're happy to let you know that we're doing another ticket giveaway thanks to Sage Wilson Property Group for an upcoming match. To enter, go to moontowersoccer.com, click on the free ticket giveaway link in the top navigation bar, or click on the link in the show notes and fill out the form.
Again, this is made possible by Sage Wilson Property Group. So if you or someone you know are in need of Sage real estate advice in Austin, you should talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Property Group. And as always, Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FVF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FVF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education.
You can go to FVF.law to find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's FVF.law. All right, we want to thank Jessica Luther one more time. We very much appreciate her expertise in talking about these things. We are a little bit nervous to do it ourselves as people who have not had to deal with this a lot. So Jessica is a person who has thought about and researched and investigated and written about these things. We're very, very grateful to have her offer her services. All right, we are going to jump into a few Patreon questions before we do our RSL preview. So our first question comes from Elise, and she's mentioning the online spat with Extra Time's Andrew Wiebe and says, is it worth trying to woo him into loving Austin FC, or should the fan base bring a view of he's just not that into you and move on to people who love us for us? And then gives a shout out to Susanna Collins.
Well, I think we should love Susanna Collins. Like, I think that's fair. And
yeah,
I think
that's
when
undisputed.
And I think when you covered your experience with Gossett Hop Squad, I think that kind of answers how you deal with Wiebe. Like, that guy's just doing it for controversy and clicks. So, like, either give him what he wants or don't. I don't think you're going to convert him.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Next one comes from Logan Bartlett. And he says, who wins the Austin FC goals plus assists race this season, Driussi or Fagundes? And I think he sent this in a couple weeks ago, so I don't know where these numbers are at, but I think they're probably pretty close. When he wrote this in, it was 7 goals plus assists for Driussi, 6 goals plus assists for Fagundes. It's not far from that. I think those numbers might be a little bit different now, but who do you think will end up with a higher total of goals plus assists at the end of the season?
I think it's Driussi. I think he's in the lead now, and I think he will continue to contribute. And if we get any more finishing from strikers like that, the assist part of that will go up too. So I don't see him falling off in terms of total goal contributions.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know that Fagundes finishes like super far behind him. Probably ends up second place on the team in those things still, and probably decent total in the whole league. But I just think back to last year, and there's a lot of games where Fagundes did not get onto the main stat sheet, but was still pretty influential in the game. I think we'll still see that from him this year. Driussi, on the other hand, if Austin's going to do well, he has to be scoring goals and getting assists. So I think Driussi will also, I think he's going to finish ahead of Fagundes.
All right, I'm going to get the next one. It's from Devin, and I appreciate that Devin asked us a question not related to marshmallows this time. It's one that's actually about soccer. Although I think maybe we still haven't done the Marshmallow Challenge yet either. But Devin says, besides winning CONCACAF Champions League, I think we can name several things MLS can do to increase legitimacy as a league. Out of a combination of curiosity and laziness, what is the highest rated perceived league that allows multiple teams to play on turf? Obviously, if it's MLS, then who's next? And you did some research on this. I don't know. I was ready to just fly off the cuff.
Yeah, so I did a little bit of research earlier. It may not be comprehensive, but I think I got all the main ones here. So there's a lot of like what I call ice countries, like Norway, Sweden, Russia. They have quite a few teams that have turf and play on turf for maintenance reasons. It's easier to deal with that in that kind of weather. There are a couple of French teams that seem to be the kind of team that like floats in between the first division and the second division that play on turf. Boa Vista in Portugal plays on turf. That's the team that Reggie Cannon plays for, and they're in the first division in Portugal. The league that I found that has the most, and this is as of a few years ago, but there were 6 Dutch teams as of a few years ago that played on turf. And so if that is still the case, then the Dutch Eredivisie is actually the most high profile league with the most teams playing on turf. And I don't know if this is controversial, but it's probably a higher profile league than MLS, right? Is that still true?
I don't think it's a controversy to say they're a higher profile league than MLS. Like, I think in some way you might be able to say, like, given changing fortunes, like the overall quality of play, MLS is higher right now. But I think if you ask the average soccer fan across the world to rate those leagues, I think the Dutch league would definitely end up higher.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where like the top, I don't know, third of that league, top quarter of that league is definitely higher quality than MLS. But then after that, I don't know. Like, I don't know where it sits. Don't watch a lot of Dutch soccer.
That's fair,
if I'm honest. But yeah, MLS has 5 teams. So Atlanta, New England, Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver. Is Charlotte, do they play on turf or is there grass?
They do play. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. I just assume because it's an NFL stadium, it's on turf, but I don't know that to be true.
Yeah, it is outside, but I don't know if they play on turf, then it's 6, then we would be tied for the most. But in any case, there is another high profile league. I mean, Portland is probably not going to be playing on grass anytime soon because they have a really nice stadium with turf in it. Seattle, New England, Atlanta all share with NFL teams. That's probably not going to change anytime soon. So it sucks. I know players hate it, but it just seems to kind of be part of the deal right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, and Atlanta and Seattle both 8 players in the last week, too. Yeah. Between João Paulo and Miles Robinson, right?
Yeah, Miles Robinson tore his Achilles.
It's his Achilles? Okay.
Yeah. All right, that is our Patreon questions for this week. If you would like to become a member of the Patreon, then you can do so on our website. Just go to moontowersoccer.com, look for the link in the top navigation bar. We did this for free for a long time, and we're happy to do it for free. But on the weeks when when we lose. It's like harder to do multiple game weeks, doing it late at night. When I'm up late at night editing, trying to get it out for Tuesday morning, knowing that we can bring in a few bucks to pay the expenses, buy our equipment with, and then have some beer money left over. It helps us a lot, right? Like it really does. So if we'll always do the show for free, but if you can throw us a couple of bucks, we'll greatly appreciate it. All right, let's get on to our RSL preview, Jeremiah. We don't have much time, so let's keep the history lesson brief.
We'll be quick. Yeah, so RSL, founded 2005 as an expansion team. They were almost the first MLS team to win the CONCACAF Champions League in 2011. They made the final. They did not pick that up. I mean, they've kind of been up and down throughout their history. They had an interesting ownership issue with Deloy Hansen, who was like said and did a lot of awful things, and it was eventually forced by the league to sell both the MLS and NWSL franchise. And now, I don't know why I didn't write his name down, but the guy who owns the Jazz is also the guy who owns RSL. That guy finished seventh last year, made it to the conference final. So there's just kind of always this team that's sort of on the fringe. So right now they are in fifth place, 4 wins, 3 draws, 4 losses. They have a negative goal differential, largely from getting creamed 6-0 by New York City FC. So why don't you talk a little bit about who we should expect to look out for? Bobby Wood, who like chased his baby down in the stands and kissed him last year after he scored against us, is definitely one player to watch out for.
Yeah, so I've not gotten to watch RSL a lot this year, but Damir Kreilach has been one of their most important players. I think along with Albert Rusnak the last few years, those two guys have kind of carried this team at times. Rusnak's now in Seattle. Kreilach ended up getting injured and has not played a ton this year. I think he's back now and will likely feature against us. But yeah, Bobby Wood, they had a guy named something Schmidt, Tanner Schmidt, Tucker Schmidt, something Schmidt. He scored 2 goals early on, but I don't know if he's injured or fell out of form. But Bobby Wood, former U.S. national team player, has been getting most of the starts at striker. He has 2 goals this year, scored against us last year, like Jeremiah just mentioned. And then Justin Miram is another name that folks will realize. So you'll have Miram on one wing, Kreilach somewhere there in the midfield, and then Bobby Wood up top. Like Jeremiah said, they're negative goal differential. They've scored 10, given up 15. So it's like not a great looking team, but they've been able to squeak out results enough to be in 5th place right now. So I don't think we should take them lightly, especially on the road, but they should also not be a team that we necessarily be afraid of either.
So you're guaranteeing victory. That's what I heard.
Absolutely. Yeah,
absolutely. So we do. We're all in the prediction business now, and it's gonna kill them on the road with Jon Gallagher on the wing.
Yeah. So this is the beginning of kind of the gauntlet that Austin FC is going to go through. So we have a week off here. This RSL game is on the weekend, but then we have LAFC midweek after that, Orlando on the weekend. Then we have a week off, and then the midweek stuff comes again after that June international break. But we've got a lot of games coming up, and this is kind of the stretch of the season where Austin really started to struggle last year. I know it's a different team. This situation is very different, but we've already talked about the depth being a little weak on the wing. And if one guy has to come out or goes down or misses a game for whatever reason, we get a little thin. Not to mention, we expect Danny Pereira to not be available for the games in Canada. And so we have some of those coming up as well. He'll probably not be available. So this is going to be a tough stretch. It's going to be a challenge for this team. So we'll see if the kind of the camaraderie, the good vibes in the group, and also just the high quality play can withstand this stretch of games coming up.
Yeah, this is as good as April was. This stretch here from where we are now in the middle of May on is definitely going to be a challenge for all those reasons. I mean, mid 3 game weeks are always a challenge, but 3 game weeks with like where we sit right now, I guess the quality of opponents that we're going to play is going to be, it's really going to measure whether this team has made significant improvement over last season or not.
Yeah, midweek away games were terrible last year, and it's a midweek away game against probably the best team in the league right now in LAFC.
So that'll be a really good show. Luckily, we'll have 2 games to talk about.
All right, I think we're done now. We'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We've seen a lot of people leaving us reviews, which we greatly appreciate. If you've left one before, leave another one. That will boost it to the top and like show as a more recent review. So that helps us out. If you want to continue the conversation, find us on Twitter at LVHero87. Jeremiah's at JBentley_ATX. And then we're at Moon Tower Soccer on Twitter and Instagram. And then we'd encourage you to visit the Striker Texas, where you can read Jessica Luther's article about the Cecilio Dominguez situation. Chris Bills has also published a couple of articles about that, as well as other more on the pitch stuff. Anything else you want to plug, Jeremiah?
Well, Phil West wrote the most Phil West of articles, which I think I've said before, but I feel like Phil West's discussion about Polio FC and sort of that history and how he's become a club legend is a very great piece for Phil to write. So I would encourage folks to check out that interview with Trevor.
I was walking through the concourse yesterday at the game, and Trevor, Polio's dad, walked past me and just like didn't say anything and just squirted me with a water bottle and kept walking.
It's awesome.
Thanks, Trevor. All right. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with a new episode of Moon Tower Soccer, where we will review the RSL game, preview the LAFC and Orlando games, and then cover any other news that comes up. Until then, I'm Landon Cottam.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.